Great, thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. So this is the chance we get to start practicing some of the elements that you've been discussing and hearing about over the last couple of days. And my job in the next 12, 13 minutes is to go through some of the basics of project design that you'll be then applying in small groups in the next room, Auditorium D. So the first thing I'm going to do is quickly review the kind of results that your project, if you're designing a project around remittances, would deliver. So I'm going to go over the results chain. So that's the kinds of things that you'll be achieving through your project. I'll then be touching on what kind of modalities might you use. So if you're designing a project, would you be doing a technical assistance project? Would you be doing what we call policy-based lending, private sector investment? I'll be going over some of those modalities, and then I'll quickly explain how the group work is going to function. We'll then break for coffee around 3:15, and then when we come back, we'll reform in groups in the other room in the 5 areas that you've all signed up for. So let me start off looking at these 2 pictures. What do you see as the difference between those 2 pictures? Anyone? So ADB builds a lot of roads. Maybe diaspora bonds would build roads. The essential difference between these pictures is the difference between what we call output and outcome. So we build a road, it's nice, it's got a nice guardrail, it's got a nice curve to it, it's probably safe. The surface is very nice and smooth when you're driving on it, it's not rough. But is anybody deriving any value from that road yet? No. So if it's not being used, if somebody's not driving down it, if they're not reducing their travel time, reducing their travel cost, then there's really no benefit from the road yet. So when you're thinking about your projects that you want to design around remittances, this kind of difference between output and outcome is crucial. So output, what we produce or deliver; outcome, the immediate benefit of use. So let me just go a little bit more into those 2 terms. So we have 3 levels of results that we use in ADB. Outputs, whatever goods, services, products delivered by your project. So when you're designing your projects, thinking about what does this project deliver, produce, and to whom. The outcome then is the immediate and direct benefit or use application of those outputs. So if it's a road, then the immediate benefit is people driving faster or maybe smoother. Maybe they're able to reach their destination in a shorter amount of time. The impact is the kind of high-level statement at the end of the day. This is what we are trying to align with and drive towards. So we're going to ask you to come up with results for your particular project. Let me run through a couple of more concrete examples for you. So ADB does a lot of technical assistance, around 200 or 300 technical assistance projects per year approved. So maybe you think in your country, in your context, what you need to do to improve remittances is to do some kind of technical assistance. So let's take the example of raising awareness. So maybe there's a mentality change or technical knowledge and you want to improve that. So we have the same results: output, produced, delivered; outcome, immediate and direct benefit of use; and then some higher level impact we're aligning with. So what might your technical assistance project look like? So the output, what do we produce, deliver? Maybe we need to increase the knowledge of productive investments of remittances by households. So people may be receiving remittances, but they buy a television, or maybe they go to Disneyland, or they spend the money on something that's not so productive. So what we want to do, what our output, what we want to deliver, produce, is knowledge, understanding around productive use of remittances. So then we move to outcome. How is that knowledge used? What's the benefit of use? So that knowledge is used, people would then, now they'd take the money from the remittances and they'd invest it in something more practical, more maybe something that's going to reap some kind of financial reward for them. So the outcome is the productivity of those remittance investments is increased. Why are we doing this? At the end of the day, what's the high-level impact that we're aligning for? Well, maybe it's around the economic well-being of those households. More of those households are lifted out of poverty, or more of those households are better off. So that's the results chain we're looking for: output, outcome, leading up to impact. Another type of project we do is policy-based lending. So this is a type of project with governments where the governments take certain policy actions. They bring in a new law, they bring in new regulations, they improve something in the enabling environment, and there's then a trigger for financial disbursement to them. So in this example, the output is that maybe the regulations around remittance services outreach undertaken by financial institutions is improved. Maybe currently we have a barrier that these financial institutions can't do the kind of outreach that they need to. Government regulation needs to be changed, so the output is that those regulations are improved. How are those outputs then used? What's the immediate and direct benefit of use? So maybe once the law is changed, these financial institutions are able to do more outreach and offer remittance services. What's the high-level impact? We hope the flow of remittances is then increased. More people, maybe in rural areas or in less accessible areas, can now access these services, and therefore there's more flow of remittances. So this is the kind of results chain that we're looking for. We want you to design in your projects. You can move up and down the results chain. So if you want to test, have I got the right things in the right boxes? You can move down by asking the question, how? So we want the flow of remittances to increase. There's many, many different ways that that could happen. How is that going to happen for your projects? We want more outreach by financial institutions. How is that going to happen? We need a change in the regulations. So you can test your results. You can move down by asking the question, how? You can move up by asking the question, why? So if somebody comes and tells you, well, we need the policy on financial services outreach for remittances, we want that improved, the question you ask is why? Well, because we want more services offered in rural areas. Why is that important? Because we want to increase the flow of remittances. So you can take the results chain and move down it, asking the question how, move up it, asking the question why. This kind of basic rule gets you the results chain in about 85% of the circumstances. Let me just run through a number of other handy tips that can help you, especially in that difference between output and outcome. So outputs, things you deliver; outcomes, more like things you directly influence. So if you build a nice road, you don't deliver the cars driving on the road, but you certainly have an influence on the cars driving on the road. Impact, only something you're aligned with. Output, something when you're designing your projects within your control. The outcome now moves outside of the project's control into the beneficiary or whoever's receiving your project's outputs. Impact, really there's no control. For attribution outputs, you can take 100% of the credit. Outcomes, partial credit. Impacts, really no credit at all. Outputs, fully accountable for. Outcomes, in ADB, we judge project success on whether the outcomes were achieved or not. And impacts, really, you're only accountable for having the correct logic and understanding. Who? So outputs, to or for whoever your clients or the beneficiaries are. Outcomes are really meeting the needs and the use by the clients or beneficiaries. Impacts, long-term change. And finally, when. So outputs would be by physical completion if you're doing anything with physical works. Outcome, by the time you end the project, that's when you want to see the outcomes starting to be achieved, and impacts really post-project closing. So these kind of handy tips can help you with differentiating when you do your project design, the difference between the different results levels. Let me just touch quickly on modalities. So what type of project, when you're working in your groups, would you want to design? So many remittance types projects may be technical assistance. So if you need new or improved models, guidelines, regulations, plans, policies, knowledge, skills, that's probably sounding like a technical assistance project. You need to train people, build their understanding, improve their systems. Policy-based lending is more about government actions. So the government bringing in new procedures, new decrees, changing laws, changing policies, that would more likely be a policy-based lending type of project. Then we have private sector investment. So these are investments in private sector companies, in funds, maybe investments in sub-projects through a bank or through different banks. So all sorts of different types of private sector investment. And finally, traditional investment lending that ADB does, which would be more like building roads and power plants, maybe not so appropriate for remittances. And could also be guarantees. Okay, so we're about to break for coffee. After that, we'll form into groups in Auditorium D. Let me just go quickly through the group work. So I'm sure after the last day, 2 days of thinking about remittances, you have many issues that you'd like to see turned into a project. So the first thing we're going to do is brainstorm. So 5 minutes, writing down on cards, sticking them up. We have pin boards. What are the issues that you feel are important? Then each group's going to select one issue to design a project around. So you each get stickers. We have stickers in the other room. You get 3 votes as to which issue you think is the most important. You can put all 3 votes on one issue. You can put 1 vote on 3 issues, however you want. Each group will have a facilitator. They will choose they will see which issue has the most votes, and that's the vote, the issue that you'll then design a project around. So the first 2 stages have to happen pretty quickly. Then we have about 50 minutes where we want you to design your project, and we'll close off going around different groups will present. So what's this going to look like? So brainstorming, you'll come up with a number of issues around remittances. So here we have 4 issues. Then you'll vote. You'll choose one issue. And then we want you to create this kind of skeleton of the project design. So what's the outcome, the immediate or direct benefit of use of the kind of outputs that you'll deliver? What activities will you need? And what kind of resources, funding, technical resources will you need? So this is what we want you to create in your groups. First brainstorming, then selecting an issue, and then developing a skeleton of project design around that. So each group will have a facilitator. Some groups have quite a few people signed up for them. If you're in a group with a lot of people and you'd rather switch to a group with less people, I think groups 4 and 5 could use some extra people. Any questions before we get started? Is that clear to everybody? So a lot of you had an interest in groups 1 and 3. That's the conducive environment for policy environment for business and technologies. So because there's so many people signed up for those, we split those into 2. So you'll have two tables that you can sit at. Okay, great. So we will resume after the coffee break.